What's up, y'all? Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and if you've been rocking with me for a while, you already know how we do over here. Today's conversation is going to be one of those reflective ones, because we need to talk about Kristy Sarah, her recent return to social media, and everything that's been unfolding publicly following her separation from her estranged husband, Desmond Scott. Now, this is not coming from a place of gossip or trying to kick somebody while they're down. This is about context, clarity, and really understanding what we're seeing and what we missed now that time has passed and the fog is starting to lift. Because if you watched Kristy's most recent posts closely, you could tell immediately that this experience has shaken her to her core, and honestly, anyone in her position would be shaken. In her return to social media, Kristy shared that she was still physically and emotionally affected by everything that happened. She said she was still shaking, and you could literally see it. Her hands were trembling, her voice wasn't fully settled, and there was a nervous energy there that felt very real and very raw. This wasn't performative, this wasn't exaggerated. This was a woman processing betrayal in real time. From what Kristy has openly shared, infidelity was involved. We all saw what happened. We saw someone come forward. We saw how public and painful it became. And more importantly, we saw how blindsided Kristy was by the entire situation. This wasn't something she anticipated. This wasn't something she was emotionally preparing for behind the scenes. This was something that hit her head on, unexpectedly, and it completely disrupted the foundation of what she believed her marriage to be. She explained that her nervous system was still trying to regulate itself because she had been confronted with what she described as the most horrendous thing she could imagine within her marriage. And that statement alone tells you how deep the wound was. This wasn't just disappointment. This wasn't just heartbreak. This was shock, grief, and betrayal colliding all at once. But what stood out to me the most wasn't just the pain, it was how she responded to it. Despite being blindsided, despite being emotionally shaken, Kristy stood 10 toes down. She didn't spiral publicly. She didn't beg. She didn't play games. She didn't entertain confusion or half answers. Once she saw what was really happening, she made a decision that this was not something she was going to tolerate or negotiate with. And that matters, because there's been a lot of narrative floating around, particularly from Desmond, suggesting that there were talks, that there was an understanding, that separation had been discussed in advance. But when you listen to Kristy and actually watch her body language, her emotional state, and her words, it becomes very clear that this was not mutual in the way it's been framed. Someone who is still shaking weeks later was not calmly transitioning into a planned separation. Someone who admits they were blindsided was not fully informed. Someone who shuts the door completely once the truth comes out was not playing along with a slow fade. Kristy saw what was happening, connected the dots, and said, "No, this ends here." And she made it clear that because of what was done, there is no possibility of reconciliation, no circling back, no reopening the door, no hope of repair. That takes strength. And here's where things get interesting. Based on the statement Desmond put out, you could tell that he believed he was operating from a position of control. There was this underlying assumption that Kristy would stay, compete for attention, or accept less than she deserved. It felt like he thought he could move freely while keeping her emotionally tethered, like she would wait around while he explored his options. And that assumption says everything, because instead of playing that role, Kristy flipped the entire situation on its head. The same way she was blindsided, she turned around and blindsided him right back, not with drama, but with decisiveness. She removed herself from the equation completely. That's when the narrative shifted. That's when people started scrambling to explain things away. But by then, the decision had already been made. Now, one thing Kristy said in her recent video really stuck with me. She mentioned wanting people to see her serious side, and even said she wanted to force people to see it. And when I heard that, I felt a way, because Kristy should never feel like she has to prove that she's serious, intelligent, or capable. You don't build an empire accidentally. You don't create viral content consistently without discipline. You don't turn creativity into income without strategy, planning, and focus. Her humor isn't a lack of seriousness, it's an expression of it. The skits, the grocery store moments, the outfits, the exaggerated voices, that's creativity, that's branding, that's knowing your audience. And behind every fun moment is someone who understands timing, editing, consistency, and engagement. The serious side has always been there. Anyone who's been paying attention already knows that. What bothered me is that her comment about forcing people to see her serious side felt like a response to trolls, to people who have labeled her as too much, annoying, or over the top, to people who tried to rewrite her personality as a flaw instead of the very thing that built her platform. Some folks tried to say Desmond needed peace, that he was overwhelmed, that Kristy was always doing the most. But let's be honest, Kristy herself explained that she only filmed content twice a week. Those clips that feel constant to viewers are filmed in batches and released over time. She wasn't performing non-stop. She wasn't living her entire life on camera. Those were intentional filming days. So the idea that he was subjected to chaos 24/7 just doesn't hold up. What does hold up is the idea that her light made someone insecure. When you go back and watch older videos now, things hit differently. There were subtle moments that didn't seem like much at the time, but in hindsight, they tell a story. Take the cinnamon roll video, for example. Kristy is sitting there enjoying this massive cinnamon roll, something her audience finds hilarious and relatable, and Desmond calls it gluttony. That wasn't playful. That was judgment. Then there were other moments where he made slick comments about her outfits, her antics, her joy, even referring to her designer gown as looking like trash when she was clearly having fun. Commenters noticed it before the divorce was public. People were already saying he was a dream killer, that he brought the energy down, that he seemed negative. Those observations didn't come out of nowhere. And here's the part people don't always consider. What we see on camera is often the mild version. If someone is comfortable making dismissive or belittling comments on camera, imagine what was being said off camera. Imagine how that slowly seeps into your confidence. Imagine how that dulls your sparkle over time. Kristy is multi-talented, multi-skilled, and multi-dimensional, but when you're around someone who subtly chips away at you, it can create a veil, a sense of limitation you don't even realize is being placed on you. That's why her statement about learning more about who she is now is so powerful. It suggests that this experience opened her eyes to parts of herself that were muted or restrained. Now, let's talk about where she is now. Her first post back wasn't sadness, wasn't explanation, it was a YSL collaboration. That alone tells you everything. Then we see her with her boys, wearing face masks together. Hers a beauty mask, theirs Iron Man and Spider-Man. Laughter, joy, presence. She talked about transitioning into a new era, and not just a chapter, a decade. A decade of discovering who she is without limitations, without criticism, without someone dimming her joy. However, Kristy Scott has officially filed for divorce and kicked Desmond out of their home. In the divorce filing, she clearly cites infidelity as the reason for ending the marriage. Desmond has since admitted that he made mistakes, but now there's an entirely separate conversation happening online about whether this cheating happened because he wanted to cheat or whether it was influenced by their religious background, specifically their alleged ties to the Jehovah's Witness faith. So today, we're going to break all of that down, talk about what's confirmed, what's speculation, and why this situation feels so layered and complicated. So let's get into it. When this story first broke, there were a lot of people who didn't want to believe the cheating allegations. Some fans were holding out hope that maybe Desmond had exaggerated or even lied about cheating in order to justify leaving the marriage. That theory gained traction because of the religious angle, which we'll talk about later. But as more information came out, it became clear that this wasn't just a rumor or a convenient excuse. There's actual video footage circulating online showing Desmond Scott publicly making out with another woman, not hiding, not sneaking around, publicly. And that detail matters because when people are comfortable enough to be affectionate in public like that, it usually means the behavior isn't new. It suggests familiarity. It suggests this wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment, but something that had likely been going on for a while. So yes, the cheating did happen, and yes, the other woman has been identified. We'll talk about her later in the video, but before we do that, it's important to take a step back and really understand who Kristy and Desmond are and why this divorce hit people so hard. For anyone who may not be familiar, Kristy and Desmond Scott, often referred to online as the Scotts, have been massive social media figures for years. What made their relationship feel so special to people is that they've been together since middle school. That alone created this fairy tale narrative around them. They grew up together, built a family together, and then built a brand together. They became well known for posting prank videos, playful content, and funny moments that showcased what looked like a fun, lighthearted, and deeply bonded marriage. Their chemistry seemed effortless. They laughed together, teased each other, and presented a relationship that many people admired and wanted to emulate. So when news broke that Kristy had filed for divorce and that she specifically cited adultery, it shattered that image for a lot of fans. Suddenly, people were questioning whether any relationship they see online is real or if it's all just performance. If you've watched their content, you already know that Kristy brings a lot of energy. She's expressive, creative, and not afraid to be over the top. She dresses up in outrageous outfits, pulls pranks, and leans heavily into humor and exaggeration. That's her brand. That's what made people fall in love with her content. Desmond, on the other hand, became known for his reactions, especially his loud laugh, his facial expressions, and his visible annoyance mixed with amusement. That contrast between them is what made the videos work. Her big personality, paired with his reactions, created viral moments over and over. Now, I will say this, sometimes I wondered how much of their content was scripted versus spontaneous. Some of Desmond's reactions felt extremely dramatic, and I've always been curious whether he was genuinely surprised or just playing along. But regardless of how their content was produced, none of that justifies cheating. You marry someone knowing who they are. You don't get to suddenly resent the very thing that built your lifestyle. And it's also important to remember that this isn't just about content or clout. Kristy and Desmond have 2 children together, their sons Vance and Weston. This is a family, not just a brand. Another factor people keep bringing up is the imbalance in fame between Kristy and Desmond. Kristy is by far the more followed partner. She has nearly 17 million followers on TikTok and over 10 million on Instagram, while Desmond has around 1 million. Now, 1 million followers is still a lot, but the gap is undeniable. Kristy is the face of the brand. She's the draw. She's the reason most people tuned in. And when the cheating news broke, a lot of fans felt protective over her, especially because she's the one who carried the content, the audience, and arguably the business side of their public life. So when people found out Desmond cheated, the backlash was intense. People weren't just disappointed, they were angry. Angry that someone would throw away a marriage, a family, and a successful partnership for what looked like recklessness. Desmond eventually addressed the situation through a statement posted on his Instagram story. In it, he apologized to Kristy, their family, and their supporters. He emphasized that Kristy is the mother of his children and said he remains committed to being an active and present father. On the surface, the message sounded respectful, but there were parts of it that raised eyebrows. Desmond claimed that toward the end of 2025, he wanted to separate and that he had conversations with Kristy about it. He also admitted that during that period, he made choices he wasn't proud of and took responsibility for them. For a lot of people, that explanation felt like an attempt to soften the blow or even shift some of the blame. It came across like he was saying, "I told her I wanted out, and things just happened after that," which didn't sit right with many viewers. Kristy's divorce filing paints a much clearer and harsher picture. She officially accused Desmond of adultery and stated that the marriage had become insupportable due to discord and conflict of personalities. She also noted that there was no reasonable expectation of reconciliation, meaning that whatever happened was severe enough that she sees no path forward at all. That wording is significant. It suggests betrayal that goes beyond repair. This wasn't a mutual drifting apart. This was a deal breaker. She also stated that they would divide their community estate, which likely includes the dream home they built together, a home that has become a topic of conversation all on its own. A few months ago, someone commented on a video of Kristy and Desmond's dream home, claiming the house had bad energy. At the time, it sounded like nonsense, but now people are revisiting that comment because the same person later claimed the home symbolized materialism and predicted the marriage wouldn't last in that space. Do I think a house made Desmond cheat? No, let's be clear about that. But I do think environments can reflect internal dynamics. A home can feel cold if the relationship inside it is breaking down. And interestingly enough, Kristy recently posted same address, suggesting she's staying in the home despite everything that happened. Honestly, that makes sense. It's her home too. She built it. She raised her kids there. She shouldn't be forced to leave just because the marriage ended. Now, let's talk about the religious speculation, because this is where things get complicated. Kristy and Desmond have been linked to the Jehovah's Witness faith, and within that belief system, divorce is extremely restricted. Adultery is often considered the only acceptable reason for divorce without facing social or religious consequences. Because of this, some people believe Desmond may have cheated intentionally to create what's called scriptural freedom. In other words, cheating as a loophole to legally and religiously exit the marriage. We don't know if that's true, but the fact that so many people find the theory plausible speaks volumes about how rigid religious systems can complicate personal relationships. Religion can provide structure and community, but it can also trap people in unhappy situations. Another conversation happening online is whether Kristy's personality and pranks contributed to the breakdown of the marriage. Some people say Desmond looked exhausted, low energy, and overwhelmed in videos. Others claim her content crossed into disrespect. I understand that perspective to an extent. Not everyone wants to live in constant noise and chaos. But again, this was their brand. This was how they made money. This was the life they built together. And if there were issues, cheating still wasn't the answer. Now let's get into the update. The woman Desmond was seen with has been identified as Marissa Springer, a 24-year-old model based in Houston. Reports suggest she didn't know who Desmond was and that they met earlier that night while out. According to sources, there was an instant spark, alcohol involved, and things escalated quickly. That detail makes this situation even messier. Desmond has been with Kristy since middle school. He never really experienced single adulthood, and now, as a father of two, he appears to be in what many would call a rebel era, making impulsive decisions with long-lasting consequences. And even when she admitted she wasn't in the mood to be over-the-top funny yet, her humor still peeked through naturally. That's who she is at her core, charismatic, personable, and real. Kristy Sarah is not losing, she's shedding. She's not broken, she's recalibrating. And what she's stepping into next is going to be even bigger than what she's built so far. She doesn't owe anyone forced seriousness. She doesn't owe sadness. She doesn't owe explanations. What she owes herself is peace, freedom, and space to grow. And from the looks of it, she's already doing just that. That's it, y'all. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be respectful, be thoughtful, and as always, thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.